Welcome back to the Evolving Warfighter. My name's Dr. Franklin Annis, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Warrior Ethos. And today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by a highly decorated Marine, one that has over 34 years in service before he retired, SgtMaj Anthony Spadaro. His last position was the Senior Enlisted Leader for the Indo-PACOM. And welcome. Thank you for being with me today.
Well, hey, Dr. Annis, thank you for this. I know we've been trying to do this for when I was in uniform, and now you lassoed me when I'm out of uniform. So, yeah, no, thanks. I've been looking forward to this. I've been following the Evolving Warfighter, and I truly enjoy what you're getting out there, and you're giving a voice to different thinking and modalities and processes. So, bravo Zulu to the Evolving Warfighter, and it's a privilege to be able to be with you today.
Well, thank you, Sergeant Major. Conversation is one that I think you made a comment on Twitter about a joint warrior ethos, and it was something that just absolutely fascinated me, and something that I really wanted to have someone really explore with me. So the Army, ever since probably the early 2000s, had rewrote the Soldier's Creed, and inside the Soldier's Creed we actually have a verse that's defined as the Warrior Ethos. So it's four sentences saying, I'll always place the mission first, I'll never accept defeat, I'll never quit, and I'll never leave a fallen comrade. So if you ask most new soldiers what the Warrior Ethos is, they're just going to default to those four sentences. But I think when we talk about it, we mean a much broader picture. So could you kind of elaborate what you believe the Warrior Ethos is?
Yeah, no, this is just, wow. Yes. And more so, in my last position, like I said, it was the coolest position in the world, being the command senior enlisted leader for the largest geographical combatant command. 377,000 soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and we include our DoD civilians and the Coast Guard. We used to joke, Indo-PACOM was literally from Bollywood to Hollywood, from polar bears to penguins. And, when you're looking at that, it's almost 52% of the world's surface was our area of operations. So I got to see across the joint force. Now you're talking a Marine, and everything from day one to a Marine, it's imbued in you that every Marine a rifleman. So when you think of the clarity of thought, how this simplicity of something very strategic in thinking, every Marine a rifleman. So I got to work with our other services, and you're right, Dr. Annis, I want to know what was the driving force behind, where is this ethos that guides them as war fighters? Because I like to think everyone that has raised their right hand and has sworn an oath like you have, like I have, like those 377,000, or the 2.1 million serving today, what guided you into when you committed yourself, when you think about our oath is literally a blood oath. I swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. Now that's the same for both officers and enlisted, where the officers take an oath of office, where the enlisted take an oath of enlistment. It varies towards the end. But in the beginning, it all starts, I swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. Wow. And you're just saying, hey, I'm giving up my life for this oath and other warfighters. So what does that mean to a warrior's ethos? And I wanted to look deep into it. I understand what the Army is saying. I understand what our Navy wants, our Air Force wants. Coast Guard. Everyone has really cool guiding lights. Even look at the Coast Guard. Semper Paratus. Always ready. Where the Marine Corps is Semper Fidelis, always faithful. Look at this bookend things. What again? Always ready. Well, the services are like that. Dr. Annis, I think it comes down to what is this driving joint warfighter ethos? I think we could go a little bit deeper, and let's call this the profession of arms. And tear it apart, the profession of arms. So we're all agreeing, regardless of military occupational specialty, rating, specialty. All the services call it something slightly different. What you come into, I think the first step is I think that's secondary. The first is that you're a warfighter, a warrior, that you're believing in this profession of arms. And the arms means, and let's go to this old Marine, I'm ready to go fight, and if I have to, die for what is right in my nation. And what's fighting? Well, fighting could take on so many different ways of getting into a fight. I mean, it could be, as like my good friend, the retired SEAC 3 Command Sergeant Major John Wayne Troxel says, is taking a meat tool to someone. Or it could be someone operating a drone protecting our national interests as we sit there and exploit a bombing or targeting run on bad people. Or, and this is, I think, the most important thing we're trying to get at this joint warfighter ethos, it's this projection of military strength to intimidate the adversary.
Okay. So you covered a lot of things there. It's interesting kind of looking back, and maybe it's just from my previous experience as a soldier, and I can see like the connection between the Army and the Marine Corps. I think the Marine Corps sells its ethos or its image a lot better. It's just interesting to think of what would kind of connect a soldier, an airman, or, a sailor, a Marine. What's the shared, unique? Well, you really hit on it. The defense of the Constitution is really that shared value in between. And really, before you would actually use that term, I'd never heard anyone actually like refer to it on a joint level in terms of appealing across the services instead of in individual branches.
Well, that's what I think, Dr. Annis, what I was trying to find is what was this common denominator across the joint force? And I think, being the simplistic, it was that oath. And because that is, everyone has the same. I mean, our promotion warrants are for the officers are the same because they come via the president, is granted through the Senate. They're the same. If you look at enlisted warrants, they're slightly different among the services, but there's still some commonalities to it, that you obey all orders, that you obey the superiors, and subordinates beneath you will obey you. But there's something I needed that was still unifying. And it literally is those first two lines that come from the oath, that everyone has to raise their right hand. And I wanted to make sure that our warfighters truly understood that, because I wanted people ready. And again, it goes back to what I said earlier, this projected strength to intimidate our adversaries, to win before fighting. And I think we have to explore that. What is the true goal of the warfighter? It is to project strength by character, by physicality, mentally, spiritually, that the adversary says, I may want to think twice about going against the United States because their military is strong, unified. And that's what's different being in the joint force, is I had to make sure I was bringing the same message all the time, and I wanted my warfighters get it. I heard this a long time ago, and I think this always struck to me. Make sure at the end of the day, they're playing your fight song. And when you think about that, when you watch the Olympics, and what goes up, the national anthem and Old Glory follows up, your fight song. And I like to think our fight song is the Star Spangled Banner. And like my old boss, Admiral Harris, said, I don't think anyone in the military is about to take a knee, especially some of the veterans that fought during Pearl Harbor did not take a knee for this. And I like to think that is our fight song. So I want to make sure at the end of the day, our fight song is being played.
So with that, how do we, or how should we, would probably be a better question. How should we tell the story of what the warrior ethos is? So is it individual examples like, hey, be more like Chesty Puller, hey, be more like Audie Murphy, or is it some type of larger archetypal story, whether it's like King Arthur? Like how do you think we should communicate that essence of a warrior ethos?
Yeah, that's awesome. And we could dovetail hopefully on another subject here, Dr. Annis, is One, you can do it through the readings, and I think there's enough historical record extolling the virtues of those that have gone before us that have truly imbued the warrior ethos. And, you mentioned a couple. And I think, though, today we have to recognize, though, the heroes of today that have imbued the warrior ethos. Last week, I did a reposting on my Facebook page about the line of Fallujah, Major Doug Zembak. And if you want to read a story that's just as stirring about the right courage who demonstrated the warrior ethos, you look at the Major Doug Zembaks of the world. And right now, with this long war, within 19 years, we have produced heroic virtue that rivals, I think, Vietnam, Korea, World War II, and World War I combined. Not taking anything away from that, but I have to look at what's gone on in the last 19 years of warfare. We have had, I'm surprised, why aren't schools being named after these people? Why aren't different halls being named after these people? Because these are people that truly, they heard the old stories. You want to know something? They lived up to them and beyond. And I don't know what's, with modern society, why aren't we capturing the essence of these men and women? And more so now, in the old days, some of the women we heard of, the Molly Pitchers from the Revolutionary War, to the stalwart efforts of women on medical corps in World War I, to World War II, to Korea and Vietnam, what they were doing, extraordinary things. But now we've had women in combat that have done extraordinary stuff. And, oh, by the way, have died doing it. And I could call those names up because some of them are friends of mine.
I'm sure we'll get into this a little further, but it's interesting because you look at the World War II generation, when the veterans came home, number one, a lot of celebrities went and actually actively participated in the war in some way or the other. So a lot of famous actors, but a lot of veterans became actors after the war and either played their own stories or just kind of accurately portrayed the combat experience or what it was to be a veteran. And
sure,
it's interesting to see in our modern era, we do have a few veterans that kind of made it into the limelight in Hollywood, but I don't think at any level we see what we have in previous generations in terms of our veterans becoming the celebrity status of kind of yesteryear.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about, look at the efforts during, say, the World War II in Korea, famous baseball players that left at great parts of their careers or the beginning of their careers and left to go fight and not, they weren't sequestered, but they were actually in real fights. You look at Ted Williams. You think about this and look what he did, and imagine if he didn't answer this nation's call. He put his nation before his career. And there's a theme there. He put his and he actually was flying in combat. It wasn't a joke. Where are these people? And it's not, the thing is, we've been in this war for 19 years. World War II was 4 years where they could have this chance to do it. Korea was another 2-3 that they could go and do this. 19 years, who among, these famous people signed up and they didn't? And it's that casual, I'm thanking them for their service. Oh, thank them for their service, get alongside me. The only one I can think of present day is Adam Driver, Marine, did not deploy to combat per se, but he raised his right hand. We have a couple of people that were successful in the service that got on and went on to pro sports careers post-service, but they already were in. So where is that thing, though, that like you were mentioning, these stars, and some of them didn't get deployed. The Glenn Millers of the world led campaigns, or others were put in roles, but they left a successful career, served, and came back. You just don't see that anymore. And that's a really interesting part of our society, of what happened to those people.
Yeah. Definitely a huge break between, when you talk about warrior ethos, you have a warrior culture, but the percentage of people serving in the military is ever decreasing with our for lots of reasons, modern technology or just the way we structure our militaries. But you look back at World War II, and it's fairly easy. I think like 7% of the population at that time participated. So you talk about the number of veterans, where you talk about combat veterans today, I'm not sure, it's probably under 1% of the general population. Obviously much higher for just regular veterans, not combat veterans, but you still have a smaller and smaller minority which has some role in it, but it's still like, who are we recognizing in our culture to, well, just to be our cultural icons? Like, who should we be?
Sure.
Yeah. Who do we hold up as heroes for our children?
I try to think about that, and I look at some of these men and women today, and like I said, if you just explore their character and their virtue, and this is the type of people that don't you want your children to be raised. I think the greatest compliment when I would sit on promotion boards and you'd review fitness reports and you would watch leaders write about someone else and they say, this is the type of man or woman I want to raise my children if I die in combat. What a powerful line that's trying to capture how they feel about this person. You know, I mean, that hit me when I would read those, and it was just one person. There was like a couple of people that would say that about someone, or like I said, this is the person I want raising my children if I die in combat. Wow. Would we say this about a lot of the Hollywood stars out there today?
Yeah.
The athletes? No, but we refer to these men and women that have come from all walks of society, everywhere. And like I said, and the cool thing about, almost 35 years in the service, I think I've seen a perfect cross-section of society. And everyone comes from everywhere. And when I mean everywhere, I work for a guy named Lieutenant General Brian Fenton right now, and he said something one day that literally blew my mind. He said, you know what, we could go over to the United States Army Pacific and we literally could find a soldier from everywhere. And when he meant everywhere, he didn't mean just the 50 states. No, he meant everywhere. And I always used to say anecdotally, he was right, because one day I needed to find a Nepalese interpreter, because I had a visit from the Nepalese command senior enlisted leader that I just got appointed to the position. But we didn't speak Nepalese. And I went over to the USARPAC, and there was an Army staff sergeant that not only spoke Nepalese, he spoke 2 different Chinese dialects, a couple other languages, and he was serving proudly in the United States Army. I mean, it was that easy. I mean, as you think, how are you going to find a Nepalese speaker? And like, Lieutenant General Fenton said, the United States Army represents everyone. And the same thing, you could do in the Navy, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, everyone. Isn't that cool about our country when you just think about the diversity of our armed forces? Everyone. And we give everyone equal chance. Everyone an equal chance to succeed and just be incredible.
So that walks into the next really interesting question. So I think we can understand whether the profession of arms or what the warrior ethos is. So how can we improve explaining that to the general public, to say, and well, at least from my own experience, I grew up in a military family, so it was literally something I had known since I was a toddler, but it's a very difficult thing to explain, hey, this is a vocation, this is a calling, this is much higher. This is the ultimate thing you can do as a citizen. How do we get down to the average person that has no military connection and say, hey, this is why I sacrifice or do the things I do for my country?
Wow, that is a great one, Dr. Annis. This is one, man, we get some audience help on this one too. I was a product, my dad was a Marine, my brother was a Marine. Well, they're Marines. I was the one that wasn't supposed to go in the Marine Corps, so it's kind of like, when you hear that, you probably aren't going to do it. It was a challenge accepted. They both did 4 years, you know what I mean? I did, a little bit more than that. And part of it was trying to unify and to be like them, because looking up to them and hearing the stories about the Marine Corps and our family and wow. And yeah. So where do you get that? And like I said, it's part of being a vocation and what's a vocation to men and women to live a very subservient, disciplined lifestyle. And how do you sell that? And I think that's the incredible challenge right now when you have to look at first numbers and when you have to look at who is recruitable across the United States, because we do have standards in the military. And that's one thing that really keeps us, as where everyone's equal, is that we have a standard and everyone has to achieve our standards. We don't achieve your standards. Remember, we don't recruit you. You're coming to us in all the services. Bereft of a draft, that is. So how do you sit there and get to this men and women to sit there like, hey, a lot of people are going to try to tell you, the military could allow you to succeed in this, or the military, it's an option for college, or it's an option for other things to grow, to learn a trade, do it in the military. Well, one of the things that I always like to sit there, and I have a little time on the drill field. If you look at my biography, I served almost 7.5 years in various positions as a drill instructor. And I got to see this gamut of society from when we were still in a Cold War, when I was a drill instructor, till coming back into leadership positions during now with this long war going on. And who are these men and women? Of course, it was right after 9/11 where we had this, battle standard rally cry in the United States, like, it was, remember the Alamo, to, remember the Maine, to now it was remember 9/11. Men and women were joining based on patriotic fervor at that point. Well, if you look at now, and now I'm in these senior leadership positions, who we're recruiting, when you only have 17% of the population that just is eligible for military service, that's not saying they're going to raise their right hand. So look at the hard job our recruiters have to do and try to say, okay, you want to go Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps? This is what it's offering right now. And what's that pull? Because some men and women now, here's the interesting crux. Anyone coming in the military now was born after 9/11.
Yeah.
So those eligible, I'm talking the 18-year-old now that's eligible, was born after 9/11. So, before we were usually to say, hey, remember the towers, remember the Pentagon, remember a field in Pennsylvania. So there's a struggle. And so I think this is where we need to get after this. And I heard this from some people at the Pentagon when I was still inside there, is that how do we have to start appealing to the patriotic fervor across the nation? And the example was given. Say, Dr. Annis, you put on your Army, now it's your new Army pinks and greens. Can't say that I heard. It's the Army service uniform. It's a wonderful uniform. And I was there when Sergeant Major of the Army Dan Daly was fighting that. If I put on the iconic dress blue uniform and you drop to, say, pick a town in middle America, any town, and you're originally from you went to school in Creighton, that's in Nebraska, right?
Yes.
I did my research on you. And say we went back to Creighton, you and I, and we were walking the streets, you in the Army service uniform, myself in the iconic dress blues, and you're wearing your rank, I'm wearing my rank, and this is what we'd hear. Hey, Sarge, how you doing? Hey, how you doing, you soldiers? Hey, Colonel, how you doing? And just calling me that. And here's a disconnect. This is own people in America, even though they're going to thank us for our service after their words, they wouldn't know what service we're in. And that's true right now. And some people might go in the audience saying, no. Yes. I was with my boss, Admiral Davidson. He was at the St. Louis airport, and someone called him a soldier. And here's a 4-star, in the Navy in his blue jacket with resplendent gold stripes. And they didn't even, hey, Captain, how you doing? Now, big deal, but we're just looking at each other like, wow, this is America. This is St. Louis. You think you would get recognized. So one, it's a basic education to America. This is what the military has to offer. And again, though, I think we have to look at, though, from the esoteric. Someone has to be ready to defend and fight. So again, I'm going to go back to this theme that our fight song is played. But we can get back to why the warrior ethos.
Well, it's interesting. It's the question of, do we sell the value of the service? So I get in this conversation with my wife sometimes. She'll name a profession and say, well, why would people do that? And so the difference is, if you're picking between, whatever, I'm going to go become a doctor, and there's several different types of doctors. Why would I choose to become a pediatrician versus a brain surgeon if the brain surgeon makes 10 times the amount? And the question is, well, you just value what the pediatrician does. And the question is, I think a lot of times, at least in the Army, we sell it as, hey, you can get free college, or hey, we'll give you this big of a paycheck. But we never really talked about, like, hey, this is the value that the organization is going to give you. This is the value you're going to take, and the pride of your job. And the question is, how do you fix that piece there? And I think the Marine Corps probably sells that a heck of a lot better than the Army.
Yeah, see, the Marine Corps is a little bit more niche. When you're talking, it's a numbers thing. When you're talking, the entirety of the Marine Corps is now drifting down from 184 to 174 to 160, possibly less, thousand. We could sell it differently. The Army, remember, what's the purpose of the Army? It's a land army. An army occupies. A Marine by nature is deployable. It's supposed to be a deployable force. That's even by our mandates. But again, in the Army, though, okay, I got it. There's going to be some good Americans that are just going to sign on for 4 years. They're going to get their benefits. They may get called back, because remember, after their 4 years, you still have 4 years where you can be called back. And I think we forget about that one. A lot of people, when they're getting out, they're going, what? Yeah, you can be recalled in the next 4 years. Let's hope to God we're never like that at a nation where we have to have that, but we have to be prepared. So we're going to sell it. But there's even Marines, they're coming in like, hey, some of them join for the benefits. But those that stay in the military, that's where I think now this inflection point occurs in their career, where, okay, now it's going to be a little bit different. So I have to understand that. I got it. Not everyone's going to be joining in for the let's go right up it. I see, like I said, if you're a soldier and you sign on, I think you understand that next 4 years, now it's the Army's. You're giving it to the Army. Same thing we know with a Marine. He's signing on and she's signing on for another 4 years as a Marine. Now it's the Marine Corps. If you decided to get out, yeah, you're going to get great. I mean, where else? Think about this with the military. What other entity in the United States, you're going to get a free college scholarship after 4 years of service? Wow, I mean, it is mind-blowing, and I really like the success stories where I've seen the young men and women. So this is what I hope, Dr. Ennis, we see, is that a young man, a young woman comes into service, does 4 years, that's a good 4 years. They get out, go on to school, graduate because of the great benefit, and then they go on to bigger and better, and now they're in a position to support the military. And that's what I want to see, is them getting out and they can still say, hey, I was proud to have served. Well, we in the military, we need those types of connective tissue. It could be either running for elected office, running a corporation, running a small business that wants to hire veterans. Or they go on to the medical or they go to the medical field and they're doing good. This is the next Nobel Peace Prize winner. And say, look, they served, you know what I mean? So I got it, we're Adam Driver, we're happy that he served, he was a Marine, he was in Star Wars. You know what I'd like to say? Wow, that Nobel Prize winner, do you know that Nobel Prize winner was in the United States Army? Is that cool or what?
Yeah. Now I'm going to have to look up and see if there's any Nobel Prize winners.
I think we do. No,
I don't know.
We have. We have astronauts right now.
Yeah. I just know why the Nobel Prize was created, because Nobel created TNT, I believe that's correct. Yes, so he was so ashamed of the fact that he basically got so many people killed, he made the prize to try to encourage people not to fight wars.
Is that great or what?
Yeah.
That's irony.
So I think I was kind of on the last cusp, because I always get in a fight whether or not I'm a millennial or not. So I was born in 1980. and my parents were rather old-fashioned. So when I was growing up, I was raised on John Wayne movies, like just crazy. And John Wayne as a character and as an actor really, well, I think the term is Americanism, but it was just a wonderful archetype of what it meant to serve or sacrifice for the country. And you take a look at any number of the war films he made, whether it was his famous one, Sands of Iwo Jima, and earlier on in his career, or you look at the later ones where he took a huge financial loss with the Green Berets, even though in the middle of a highly contested war, here he is trying to talk about fighting communism and doing good.
Yes.
We've really lost those cultural icons. I wonder if you had any opinion about kind of how we get those back, or...
Wow, Dr. Ennis, man, I think you have a crystal ball hidden under there, because this is one thing I'm very passionate about. Even though John Wayne never served, and he had to convince some Marines who get really upset, and soldiers, that think that he did serve. And here's the mind-blowing thing is those movies were made while we're fighting a war. I mean, the Sands of Iwo Jima, we're allowing them to use the military equipment and stuff during the war was going on. What a great movie. I mean, wow. Sergeant Stryker. I mean, even though he never was a Marine, I'd walk into Marines' barracks rooms and there's posters of Sergeant Stryker things, or the Green Berets fighting communism. And what was the incredible thing? We defeated communism. Because let's go to the 1980s and let's take a quick... Now, remember, you gave it away, you were born in 1980. So I don't think your parents were allowing you to watch the following movies unless you're sneaking late at night. But these are movies with titles such as Red Dawn.
Oh, yeah.
This is a title called Rambo. And he went up to a couple other times that he continually fought against. Now, the first Rambo, no. But remember when Rambo now went against the Soviet Union that was coming back from Afghanistan? Okay? Full Metal Jacket with a Marine. A real live Marine that was a real live drill instructor. And there's a bunch of other movies. God rest Gunny Ermey's soul. He passed away the other year. And Lee was a personal friend of mine. So it really touches home. But he made a bunch of movies. That Siege of Firebase Gloria, one of my favorite movies of all time. Again, winning in Vietnam. He was a technical director in Apocalypse Now. That was his first movie. If you see the Redux version, he's the helicopter pilot that's taking on, Robert Duvall in the back.
I never realized that.
That's the second one, the Redux. You can see Lee. He had, the Boys of Company C, but there was a bunch. But I'd like to even go back to Top Gun. And I'm not going to flip the bird on our little thing, but what's the big iconic thing? They flipped the bird to the Soviet Union, the MiG. And what happened because of a president that was pushing Americanism? The wall came down.
Yeah.
And did we ever have to go fight the Soviets? No. How did we do it? It was a war of wills. Win before fighting, an expression of Americanism. And we did it via movies.
Yeah.
Well, what do we have now for movies that are expressions of Americanism? I don't know. Now, you're the one, okay, if you want to put yourself out of money, tell me the movie. And I'd like to see the movie. And again, now, were the movies of the 80s instill Americanism? No. No, I'm not saying that's a cure-all or a panacea to get out there. No. But where is that? How do we imbue that sense of Americanism to... This is who we are as Americans, and we will win before fighting. And if you look, like I said, Red Dawn, man, someone comes up to us and there's a bunch of teenagers, that just believed in what? Well, it was their school was attacked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they bonded beyond that. Do we see that, fighting behind, your schools or each other, your communities? I think we're seeing some of this with the COVID response, some communities that are standing up and trying to be good Americans and expressing that. I don't know, Dr. Ennis. I wish we could find some of these expressions of Americanism, like Where Are You, John Wayne, or maybe that's not going to happen. I mean, the closest we probably had was Clint Eastwood. You look at what he did. When he did Heartbreak Ridge, which was an incredible movie, and again, fighting what? The Grenada thing, going against communists again, lots of lines about fighting communists. We weren't afraid to say that. Well, you know what we need to say now, and I'll go on the record. Who's our adversary? Well, I'll tell you who our adversary is, and it's been stated in the National Defense Authority, in our National Defense, anything in our National Defense structure has said, well, our adversary challenges are who? China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and terrorism, period. So there's your adversarial challenges, and this is who we need to fight right now. China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and terrorists, which is the hardest one because it's so pervasive right now. Their ideology is spread everywhere. And like I said, remember, China and Russia, fighting against them could change the American way of life. And I don't think we're recognizing this could literally change. Well, look what happened with COVID. It's changing the American way of how we do business. So those are my thoughts. I mean, I know I didn't give you an answer. You can see the passion, but I'm saying, where are you, John Wayne?
Well, it's interesting because, I remember in high school sitting in a lecture about Shakespeare, and it was one of the reasons why Shakespeare was kind of so good as a author is like the villains in Shakespeare are just evil. Like there's no backstory, there's no explanation, there's no kind of like, oh, the mother treated them bad, so now we're going to feel sorry for him, so maybe we'll refine or try to, whatever, save this person. It was like, no, this person's just evil. And I think whether now we try to have a lot more nuanced approach, but it's very difficult to say, well, even you see it now, like I can say right now without a doubt that China or communist government in China is nothing but evil because just the way it's authoritarian. But you'd have a lot of people take that comment to say China's bad, to say, oh, you're referring to that ethnicity or those people or whatever else. And it's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying very specific things that I'll just name as evil and not.
No, Dr. Annis, my fight is not against China. My fight is against the Chinese Communist Party, the 90 million strong in it. Yes. My argument isn't off the local farmer in the Northwest province who probably has no idea this is going on. My fight is against the Chinese Communist Party, period, and their nefarious influences that they're doing over others through debt diplomacy, you name it. I don't see it where in America there's a sense of they'll help our partners. China is using that, but to do what? To now secure their rights from them. And that's my argument. Yeah, so no, my fight is against the Chinese Communist Party. Because, here's an interesting statistic, Dr. Annis. You ever seen this? Anyone we've been to a fight with in the United States, now our partners?
Yeah.
One of our best partners right now is Vietnam. Incredible partner with an incredible, just how they're going after things right now in that contentious area. And even uniquely, they're the last ones to fight China and win.
Yeah. You're right there. Well, I just think of the whole COVID crisis. Number one, it's going to be interesting to see, like, are we going to walk out of this and say, like, now we're going to start saying that, hey, we're going to start looking at whether it tags the back of shirts or things and start saying, hey, I'm going to start buying things based on where stuff's made versus the cheapest price, which I could see maybe that's going to start to become a reaction. And the other thing is, just with bad will of China, you have a ton of other little third world countries in Asia that really, if they had a chance to become more capitalistic, start industries, they could really explode and, become first world nations. They just need a chance or a market, and maybe this was enough to kind of knock China out, and now all of a sudden we're going to go to Vietnam instead of China to buy whatever surgical masks or whatever toys or whatever else.
Okay, from Taiwan, a key partner of ours. When you look at that whole area, of just that area from India to the shores of Japan, when you look at the amount of people that live there, more people live inside that little cantonment area said from, say, the border of India to the shores of Japan, the eastern shores, just that alone, that grouping, and taking Australia down to New Zealand on up, more people live inside that area than live outside that area. And I like to believe that, like Admiral Harris and Admiral Davidson would say, was that there is such an area for opportunity there. The next Nobel Prize winner, you name the field, can come from that area. That's going to benefit all of man. And now again, too, there's a lot of consequence from those areas, too. The next person that may be trying to do something bad could come from there because just the sheer numbers. But I'm trying to look at, how do we support this growing thing of let's get the support out there. There's someone there, regardless of ethnicity, race, whatever, which is really contentious in those areas, tribal lines, is fighting through that. And also to the United States, we respond to those crises. That's what we do. We have the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force on standby continually to respond to whatever, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief operation in that area. Well, we respond with them. China responds with money.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I like to see the gratitude of man. And you know what that demonstrates to partners in it? And other partners have supported us when we've had natural disasters.
Let me try to get us back on topic of the Warrior Ethos.
Yeah.
How does the Warrior Ethos tie with the values of the different service branches? Or do you have an answer for that question?
Now, let's go back to Dr. Annis exploring how the Warrior Ethos, I think, is transcendental throughout the services. And I'd like to use that, like I said, going back to your earlier discussion, our common denominator will always be this profession of arms, but mostly what are the lines of our oath of an office or oath of enlistment? I swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. I bear true faith and allegiance to the same. Boom, blood oath. And there's some things, I like to color my talks with talks or thinking, and great book. Right here, Stephen Pressfield wrote this book called The Warrior Ethos. And what's cool about Pressfield is Gates of Fire, which led to this really cool movie called 300. Wow, what a great movie, too. I mean, how many barracks room would you walk by and you'd see it? And how many times in Iraq and Afghanistan you'd hear, eat hearty, you know what I mean, when we're getting ready to cross the LOD. But Pressfield, in this little tome, in like chapters no more than 3 pages, really captures what's this warrior ethos is about, that it goes across all services. And like I said, I've given away these copies multiple times. I always have to get more to earmark them, and I use them when I'm teaching classes with now. It's funny because like the one thing I go right to, ethos. One of my little sub things to go after. And Pressfield talks about, it all comes down to is self-preservation of the species. And why do men and women decide to sign on to the military? And deep inside, his argument is that we're all attracted because we want to preserve the species. So for us, it's the American way of life. I think to your question, though, is how do we enthuse that throughout the services? I'd like to hope, and hope's not an option or COA, but there are non-commissioned officers out there, specifically corporals and sergeants and petty officers and airmen, that are out there imbuing to them and understanding it, hey, this is why you're here. And I'd like to think it starts with them, however, with top cover from that platoon commander, that patrol leader rank, so that first lieutenant. I got the second lieutenant's going to be molded a little bit, but now the first lieutenant, a little bit more matured and discerned, is giving this top cover to that sergeant to get their squads or platoons together and have a kneecap to kneecap discussion. And why are you here? And listen to it. And some of their warfighters may say, hey, I'm here for the college things. Oh, okay, well, it's a little bit bigger than that. So I'm hoping those discussions go on. And I always try to promote those types of discussions. Is it the chief petty officer with the lieutenant sitting down with one of their, sections on a boat? Hey, this is why we're here to fight this boat. What is one of the famous slogans given in the Navy, and they fly a pennant? Don't give up the ship. Powerful, powerful. When you look at these incredible airmen through the years, you have Robin Olds, dashing Robin Olds, and his warfighting thinking, Lance St. John, who went and, was survived as a POW, or Bud Day, who survived. I mean, these great airmen through history that just led the way. Man, this is what I want to hear about. And then there's modern versions right now. I mean, if you look at now our current SEAC 4, Chief Master Sergeant Ramon Colin Lopez, there's history books written about his performance deployed in Afghanistan. So I think we have these things that we can get our guys around and gals and sit there and say, hey, these are these people that they look beyond what's in it for them and saw what's in it for serving with others. So we have to start looking at selflessness. So that's what I would hope, Dr. Annis, that your PTL or your platoon sergeant are sitting down with their folks and they're talking about selflessness. I got it. You're not going to get 100% selflessness out of them all, but you're going to get some. And that's the some that are going to stay in. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to raise their right hand again. And I got it that first time saying their oath, they were just saying it because they were whatever reasons. It's that second, third, fourth, fifth. I'm trying to think of times I take the oath. I mean, it got to me. That's the thing. And I think the most emotional I would get, Dr. Annis, was on my oath. Really, I would get super emotional with my oath because I realized it was a blood oath.
Well, and that's really interesting to say. Well, I've always had kind of a problem with the military recruiting officers from people just off the street without understanding the culture. But we're really talking about that, whether it's the second enlistment or that young service member that says, not only do I want to stay in this culture, I want to lead in this culture and step up the officer ranks. But it's really once you get in and you understand it fully, whether or not you decide to stay, it's just really remarkable that we have people that will say, yeah, I'll stay in for 34 years, which is...
Well, no, you know why we stay in, though, and everyone was this, why? And I said, it was the people.
Yeah.
And the hardest part of my transition right now is the people, missing them. I love them all. And that's the hardest thing right now is I loved being around the men and women I served for and alongside. And I love them to death. And I got to see everybody. And there's where, when you sit there and you're able to ask any of us, I think, that get out after this time in, what do you miss the most? And you can do a survey right now, pick 10 senior leaders, and I'm going to guarantee you're going to get 10 of the same answer. It's going to be the people. I go as first, it's going to be a perfect test for you to run. What do you miss the most? And it's going to be the people. Wow, what a beautiful indictment, going back to your earlier comments of vocation, of why we serve selflessly for others. So, yeah, I mean, not a day has gone by now. We're going on to day 28 that the uniform's taken off. I kind of see if I could do something I didn't get to do in 35 years, was no haircut and grow some facial hair that my wife's after me to trim up and look presentable. This is my little take it to the man for once that I got to do for 35 years. And it's not out of laziness. I think it's just a bad experiment. So if we ever have a follow-on talk, I'll probably be clean-faced.
Yeah.
But there's, I think, the beautiful essence of, I think, what we're trying to drive here. The warrior ethos will always come down to people. And even when you look at Pressfield's book, he'll illustrate that, and he uses only a couple different vignettes of the Spartans and mostly Alexander in his fight. And it was always about the people.
I could really imagine that. So I deployed once to Iraq, and I could imagine someone saying, hey, would you go back to Iraq? And me being like, hey, that's a terrible place to go. But it's like, hey, you can take all your old soldiers with you, and it's like, okay, that'll go, because it's, not Iraq, it's, the platoon sergeant, platoon leaders, it's your soldiers, it's the,
it's funny, I got the question one time, is like, why are you always asking to go back? And it came literally from my sister, and I kind of looked at her cross-eyed because her husband was a fireman. And I said, what does he do for a living? It's not that he can't wait for a fire. He doesn't want fires to happen, but when there's a fire going down, he's ready to go fight a fire. I try to say, hey, look, this is what we exist for in the military, is that someone's trying to infringe upon the American way of life. There has to be men and women ready to take up arms to preserve the American way of life, if you believe in it. I believe in it. Like I said, this is maybe, like I said, I had a great dad and a phenomenal brother that put this thinking into me about, this is our nation. I go back to a line from Stephen Decatur, that this was also one of my rally cries, Dr. Annis, and from Stephen Decatur was, my country, right or wrong, my country, period. Okay, so whatever is going on in America today, my country, right or wrong, my country. And that's why I like I said, if they would let me stay in, man, I'd stay in. But General Mattis said it best. We all have a shelf life.
Yes.
And you know what? And it's coming from someone like him. Yeah, we all have a shelf life, and there's others right now that need to come in and continue this on, and there are. And that's one thing I know. Leaving, no looking back, is because there are incredible men and women right now that. Whoa, incredible. So rest easy.
Perpetual cycle of training your replacement.
Yeah, you better. Yeah. That's why, we call it validating your credentials. You train your replacement. So I used to love it, where I used to have some of the young ones that would confront me after one of my town halls. And I'm talking, a young sergeant would come up to me, or a young airman first class, or a petty officer, always, I'm going to have your job one day. Oh man, I would get so excited, and just they come up with this bravado and swagger, and I'm going to have your job. And it's like, yes, you are. Man, I was so excited. Some of the young ones would come up with that one. It's like, hells yes, let's see what we can do. And because a lot of them have no clue about what a command senior enlisted leader would do at a geographical combatant command. They always know who their service senior enlisted are, so they can tell you the SMA, Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard, right away. But they didn't realize that you had these other combatant command senior enlisted leaders sitting at the same table with those guys. But again, everyone said, what do they exist for? And I said, well, they exist for the service senior enlisted for man, trip, and equip, man, train, and equip. And what we got to exist for at the geographical combatant command level was, you're going to war, and who's ready to go to war. And that's why, I had it made. All I had to worry about was those war fighters. Were they ready to go into a fight?
Well, I know you named a couple books. Was there any other reading or recommendations you had in terms of?
Yeah, Dr. Annis, right now I have a couple that I'd like, and hey guys, I don't get any connection with this too. I just want to say, if there's one that I think that meant something, if we want to go back, Dr. Annis, on a couple of things, and a couple of points you've been trying to drive home with the Evolving Warfighter series, is a pretty cool book, Legacy, James Kerr. And it's a really cool book about the New Zealand All Blacks. And this is a really good book about character. And I'm not going to get into it because you can all look it up, but what I like about this is really, this book examines character. And I like to think that the first essence of leadership is always to character first. And it's going to be argumentative across the board. That's just Spadaro's viewpoint, but the great leaders, it all starts with sterling character. And this is a great book that really addresses about character, using great vignettes, starting with the New Zealand All Blacks, the most successful sports team in the history of man, who had a crisis who started to lose. Well, you're not supposed to lose, remember? So it addresses how, and it teaches, like I said, it's interesting. It says about business life. I'm looking about life in general, how you should sit there and recruit to character, because you could train good to great. So say someone is good at something, you could train that person to go from good to great. The issue is that character flaws during that time, you usually can't change a character flaw on someone. So when you're recruiting talent, you recruit character first, but you'll create good to great after that. But and I hope that's the quick. I don't want to get into it because I could go on and on. We're not going to talk book reviews here, but I don't want to give it away because I hope people read the book. But the one book I do like to sit there is a friend of mine, and this is maybe a selfless plug for a good friend of mine. Wrote this incredible book, Echo and Ramadi, and by Scott Husing. And this is a book about Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, or in the Marine Corps, they are allowed to have the moniker the Magnificent Bastards from their for Vietnam prowess. But it's a look at 2006 when he deployed. And the wonderful part about this book, where I hope all those at that PTL, platoon sergeant, that type of relationship would read this book, is that it really explores the essence of why we train and we trust in our platoon commanders, PTL level platoon sergeants. And that's what I think what then Major Scott Husing, when he wrote this, and he's retired now after a very successful career, started out as a Lance Corporal, started out enlisted, commissioned on up, and leading one of the greatest units in combat, with all the glory subscribed to it that is deserved. But he really talks about, and Major Husing, Scott has a beautiful line in this book. It says there's no such thing as combat leadership. There's only leadership. And I think we've muddied this sometimes when we're looking at, again, we're trying to extol earlier the virtues of combat and what goes on. Well, if it was always about leadership before, and I think what Scott Husing does perfectly, he captures in this book, is one of those main things of the essence of strong leadership throughout, and taking care of then his Marines. And you know what? But it goes beyond that, because one, he took care of them during combat, but even more so when he returned home, he took care of those Marines and their families. Look at this type of leader. Where do we see leaders now that they meant it when they said, I'm here to take care of these Marines all the time? It just wasn't just when I had command. It goes beyond that. And that's the beauty of what Scott Husing does in Echo and Ramadi. So I like the tale when you hear Echo in Ramadi. The Echo and Ramadi is, of course, after Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines. I love the book because, man, you could smell Fallujah again. You could feel it. You could sense it. He literally writes on a level like James Webb would write when he wrote Fields of Fire. But more importantly is how he heralds those platoon commanders and platoon sergeants and Marines that he served alongside that were just great. It's a little bit of a tough read. It's a tough read about coming home, redeploying. It's a tough read when we realize we have veteran suicide right now. There's 22 a day or more. I mean, the numbers are all over the place, and people are going to, you know what? I don't care, Dr. Annis, about the numbers. Someone's going to say it's 17. Someone's going to say it's 24. I posted something the other day. They said I was wrong. One is too many. And everyone's saying, we're corners. I don't know. We're just putting these in different avenues look, one's too many. And we're seeing these men and women that they were valorous on the battlefield coming home and trying to confront demons, and how do we help them and how do we stop this? So again, this is already doing well as a book, so he doesn't need, book sales are always good. It's already in paperback. But and I didn't tell Scott I'm doing this yet, so when I get off of here, I'm going to tell, hey, Scott, man, I just threw you under the bus, but waiting for this to come out in movie form. Yeah, I mean, I've had to read this a couple of times. It's a phenomenal book.
Well, unfortunately, we're running short on time, but before we go, how does the audience follow you or connect with you on social media?
Okay, well, here's the problem. God, I love social media, Dr. Annis. I do. I'm not trying to be, I was a Luddite going into this. I used to have blue verified check marks, and I don't know if I still have them because they were under when I was still with Paycom, but I do have @AA Spadaro on Twitter. I'm very involved in Dr. Annis. I think that's how we became associated. I'm on Instagram @AA Spadaro, not checked, and then on, I'm trying to remember what it is on Facebook, but if you ask me on those two, I'll lead you to the Facebook page. I could look it up real quick. Here's the problem. I was verified on Facebook, on Twitter, and Instagram. I still have the accounts when I was at the Paycom SEL, so @PACOMSEL. Here's the problem right now. If you put my name, just Anthony Spadaro, Spadaro, into a search function in Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, there's about 14 of me are going to pop up with my pictures, and you got to be careful because they're going to ask you for money. So someone is using it quite successfully. So if you go on the verified sites or just DM me or sit there, and I don't have a social media team any longer that used to do all this work for me. So now that I'm out, I keep getting reports that my image has been stolen. But if you follow me and they go to you, I'll be able to verify it because I'm going to be hooked up with you. But that's it. I'm very active on those. I'm probably the most active, if you're going to get me involved, is on Twitter right now. And the only reason why it seems to be the bad guys really can't ask for money in Twitter because they can't get it out in 280 characters. But it's the field grade leaders that I'm with right now. And it's great that I'm getting engaging in a lot of great discourse. And I hope they're coming to ask me questions that like an old sergeant major or old senior enlisted can help them figure some things out career-wise or book-wise or article-wise. And you see, Dr. Annis, how active we all are going back with that. And it's great. I'd like to keep a very active social media thing. I'm still learning. Like I said, I don't have a social media team to help me. So there's some learning points to gain on there. So be very careful. I try to use proper grammar when I'm on this. So the first giveaway, if you go to one of the bad sites, is the grammar is probably going to be off. And I do not put pictures of flowers or cars or other stuff on my sites, bad giveaway. I don't use the term. I use very proper military terms. And oh, by the way, I'm not divorced. I'm not widowed. I'm happily married. I don't live in Kabul. Where else have I been accused? I don't know how a Marine is associated to the Army, but these are the red herring signs you should see on these sites. So if you go to the wrong site, you can probably tell what the real site is.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. For the audience out there, I invite you to subscribe to the Evolving Warfighter for more videos on military self-development and military history. Until next time, focus on your self-development so you can dominate the modern battlefield. Thank you.
Hey, Dr. Annis, you remain indomitable, remain resolute, but above all, remain relentless in all you do. And thank you for this opportunity finally. And I hope we get to do this again sometimes. But God bless you and stay well and safe.
Thanks, Sergeant.